You should be the host here.
We're laughing at you.
We're both Munster people, diehard Munster people, and we want them to do well.
The Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster rugby better.
I'd like to think I know a lot. Welcome along to episode 10 of the Red 78, your go-to podcast for everything Munster rugby, here on the Rugby channel with me, Alan Quinlan, and as always, Niamh Briggs. 10 episodes in, Niamh. Can you believe we've done 10 so far? It's been flying.
I can't believe it. It's been great.
Yeah, well, listen, don't forget to get in touch with your thoughts on all things Munster. You can tweet us at the Rugby channel or search the Rugby channel on YouTube and leave a comment. To subscribe to the podcast, just search the Red 78 and you'll get the podcast straight to your phone every week. Now, Niamh, down to the real business. We're complaining for a couple of weeks. We hadn't a lot to talk about, but Munster in Wasps at the weekend, they've done the unthinkable, really. And this morning, the news has come out that Johann Van Graan is leaving Munster at the end of the season. So, bit of a bombshell, really, with that one. But I suppose it was on the cards in the first couple of weeks, in the last couple of weeks. We'll talk about the match in a few minutes, but Johann, really, that's the big news story, isn't it, this morning? And some people would be surprised, but I suppose the indecision in the last few weeks and him not signing that contract put the whole thing in doubt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when Steve Larkin came out and said he was going home, I think that kind of put a few heads in terms of, well, is Van Graan going to sign? And I think, look, you've got to be gutted. I think gutted for the players. I think the coaching merry-go-round in Munster is doesn't offer stability. So it'll be interesting to see the direction that they go. But to be fair, I know some people will have, and everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I think Van Graan's done quite a good job with this group of players that he's had. And look, I just think you've got to be a little bit gutted if you're a player, knowing that two of your coaches are heading off the end of the season.
Yeah, it throws things in a bit of doubt, I suppose. Look, if we look back at Johann's tenure with Munster, and I think one of the reasons, look, I've said this about coaches as well as players. As players, you get opportunities, you get contacted by other clubs, your agent gets phone calls, he rings you, particularly when it's coming up to renewing your contract. So coaches are no different, and they have to look after what's best for themselves, whether you like it or not. Johann hasn't won a trophy. Munster haven't won a trophy since 2011. They came close on a couple of occasions. That final last year ended up being very disappointing against Leinster, probably the performance. But I think he's a good guy. I've had dealings with him. Very well respected guy. But there's this expectation and pressure with Munster. And I have a feeling that Johann hasn't felt the love from outside the group. I think from what I hear internally, the players, he's very popular with the players. There's a good morale, even though they've had to take a lot of ups and downs in the last couple of years. Maybe it's the outside influence and what Johann himself is feeling has made this decision. The Munster fans are renowned for being wonderful fans and brilliant supporters of his team, going right back to my time, but they're pretty demanding as well and impatient, I think, and that impatience has increased in the last number of years, hasn't it?
It has. I think a lot to do when you're looking across the province borderlines and you're seeing what Leinster are doing and how the type of game, the game that they play. It can be easier on the eye at times, and I think that from a supporter's point of view, you want to try and win as many trophies or as be up there with the Leinsters. But I think, to be fair, this group of players probably this year maybe, and a little bit of last year, but I think that there was a time there when that group of players, Europe has gone so tough. And Quinny, we've spoken about this so many times about how difficult it is to win a trophy, especially in Europe. And when you're up against the likes of the French teams that can pay huge amount of wages and they can attract players from all over the world, it can be really difficult to compete with that. And I just think that Munster ceiling the last few years probably was in around that semi-final berth. I think that's probably, and might not be a proper thing to say, but I just think that when you're up against the likes of the Racings, the La Rochelles, the Toulouses, they're so stacked, not from 1 to 15, but from 1 to 30. And I think that it's been really difficult for the Irish provinces to be able to compete with that. And Munster have been no different.
And Saracens as well have been very, very
100%.
dominant. Munster have lost a couple of semi-finals. So there's been 3 European semi-finals that Munster have lost under Johann, and a couple of semi-finals in the Pro 14 and that final last year. And so they've come close, but maybe people talk about the coaching, and I think a little bit of frustration about maybe the type of game that Munster have played, and maybe kicking and the defensive approach. And maybe you talk about DNA for coaches and their philosophies and stuff. And look, being respectful, I think, the South African approach is more kick the ball and more defensive and more pressure on the opposition and try and use your brute force and strength. And maybe Munster have not fulfilled what he wanted out of them. I think under Rassie, Erasmus and Jack Niamh, I think Johann had probably a better quality and more depth in his squads, but under Rassie and Jack Niamh, and even under Axel, I think there was issues around the quality and depth in the squad. And, when Rassie kind of put his stamp on the team, they became a very hard team to beat, very effective with their kicking game, their box kicking, their pressure on the opposition. And that got them to semi-final status as well. And I remember that game they lost in the Aviva and was 16-17 against Saracens. There was a gulf in the difference, even though Saracens themselves kicked the ball a lot. And that final against Scarlets in the Pro 14, where Scarlets just really opened Munster up and demolished them on the day in the final. I think there's a certain level of that type of game that we've seen a change in the last 18 months. And I think we've seen the adaptability maybe and maybe the need for change in the way Munster are playing. And we've seen glimpses of it. I think back to Clermont last year, they're 19 points down in Europe, and the way they chased the game and their execution, some of the tries they scored were brilliant. And maybe that's part of the reason why Johann is leaving, that he's feeling, look, this is a critical moment for him as a coach. He'll be here 5 years this year at the end of this season, hasn't won a trophy. If he stays for another 2 and doesn't win a trophy, that's 7 years in a club that maybe people are not happy about, that there's rumblings. And I have a chance now to go somewhere else, get a 3-4 year contract somewhere and maybe start afresh.
Yeah, that could be it too. I think sometimes as a coach, if you're dealing with the same players week in, week out, can lose, you can lose the message a little bit along the way. I 100% agree with you. I think in the last 18 months, maybe that's the Steve Larkham effect coming in, and Graham Rowntree too, that they're definitely trying to play a different way. It's just they've been ingrained for so long.
From what I've heard, the Rassie way and even the Johann way to start, I think he changed and he kind of handed the reins over to Stephen Larkham, who probably wanted to kick a lot himself. And look, kicking is a very important part of the game. But the issues maybe that I would have had in the last couple of years, maybe when we're chasing a game, if you're ahead and you're winning and you're a coach yourself, if your team are winning and you score 2 or 3 maul tries and you're leading by 10, 15 points, well, no problem. Kick the letter off it, be boring, just grind the life out of the opposition. And even the supporters don't mind that, but it's probably when you're chasing the game. And I think Munster have been in positions where it's been unfamiliar with them, i.e. when they're chasing a game, it's not something they're naturally doing, particularly off phase and the shape and all that kind of stuff. So I think that we've seen some evolution there. And I'm kind of disappointed because I like Johann, and I really think that there's obviously with what happened in Wasps and the young fellas that have come out in the last few weeks have kind of galvanized the group. And it's a shame that, hopefully between now and the end of the season, they can put themselves in a position to win something, either Pro 14 or Europe. Big ask, of course, as you say, with Leinster being, so powerful, and then Europe, it's luck of the draw, and you're playing powerhouses there, big budgets. So I kind of feel sorry in a sense that he's not going to be there, because he kind of handed the reins over to Stephen Larkin.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, going back as far as the Scarlets game in the URC, even the first couple of games, you're looking at, against the Stormers, and that, John Ryan tipping the ball onto Archer, and we're now seeing this little bit of an evolution that we probably wouldn't have seen before. I think I got very excited after the Scarlets game, because you can see what they're trying to do. I think that the Wasps game the weekend is another kind of continuation of that, in terms of looking to move the ball, looking to move the space, back in the skills. And I thought it was really good. I don't know if you listened to any of Billy Holland's interviews last week, because he was been awarded the Tom Rooney Award last week from the Rugby Writers. I think he spoke about how Larkham, for the first time ever, the forwards were doing stuff like catch pass, decision making, putting themselves into positions where they're comfortable on the ball. And I think that's probably what's been missing the last few years.
Well, hold on a minute, Niamh.
I've seen you try to pass the ball forwardly.
Players need to be comfortable on the ball. And I think, look, sometimes it is down to personnel, no matter how good the coach is. If certain guys are not footballers, Quinny, it's not natural.
Completely. But what I'm trying to say to you is that during Razzie's time and at the start of Van Graan's time, maybe that wasn't the focus. The focus was on unit work. The focus was on defensive work, whereas now it's about the whole game. And I think, it was interesting to hear Billy Holland say that during the week. And I think that we're starting to see that now. We're starting to see, that Wasps game, O'Mahony flinging offloads and 5 and 6 meter passes, going back to what they're good at. And this is the big thing about coaching, I think, is that you're not looking at, what way you want to play. You've got to find what way suits the best for this group. Are they good? Are they mobile? Completely. This pack, this Munster pack are incredibly mobile. So let's work them around the park. Let's work teams around the park and find a way that we can break teams down by playing the way that suits us, as opposed to what suits other teams. And I think that's why I'm disappointed this morning, because I felt like they were starting to do that. I think through Larkham and Roundtree and Van Graan, we were starting to see them finding a way to move teams around the pitch, to be able to find what they're good at too, and back their skills.
But finding a way, of course, I agree. And is it just a case of that Johann has made a decision here that, look, you're kind of rolling the dice here to win the Pro 14 or win in Europe? Is it no matter what Munster do, no matter what way they play, it's a big step. You're going against like I say, Leinster, and we know that, and unfortunately we have to keep mentioning Leinster from a Munster point of view, but they're hard to beat. They have a lot of depth. They have a lot of most of the internationals. So
do Munster now, is what
I know,
I'm trying to say on the back of this.
Of course. Is that the difference though? Is that the difference, that it's the way we play? And if we attack and get really good at our attack between now and the end of the season, does that put us in a better place, a better chance of winning a trophy? Or are we still a kind of step away from that very top level of the top 3 or 4 in Europe? Are we still under the top 4 or 5 in Europe?
I don't think it's a case of just going attack. I think it's a case that you find, like, you notice, like, when you're playing at that level, everything is about confidence. It's about being comfortable. It's about being able to do things that you could do in your sleep. And I think that Munster have started since the start of the season, for me, have started to get into a type of a game plan or a structure where they feel, when I look at them, they look really comfortable about what they're doing.
Yeah, but my point here is, Johann even kind of indicated this in his statement, that maybe it's best for Munster, that he's kind of saying that he's brought them to a point now that,
and fair play to him. Like, and I agree with you. He's been an absolute gentleman anytime I've met him, in terms of he's been incredibly supportive of the women's game. He's come in and spoken to the women's team the last 2 seasons. And anytime you meet him, he's very interested in the women's game. And for me as a coach, like, incredibly open. So, like, you are sorry to see him go. And if he feels that, he's brought them as far as he can, well, it's very brave then for him to turn around and say, look, I brought you as far as I can. But I do still feel like that there's more in this group and more in this coaching ticket.
this could go two ways now for Johann. I hope it goes in a really positive way, and I'd love for the Munster fans to give him a great send-off at the end of the season, and the players. I think the mood in the camp and the morale can only be enhanced by what happened in the last couple of weeks. And there's no guarantee. So the danger with head coach, particularly announcing they're moving, obviously from a Munster point of view, it gives them some time, and they have clarity on this now. Stephen Larkham, they've an assistant coach to replace and a head coach. It can go both ways. Players can drop their standard a little bit. It can have a positive effect or a negative effect. I don't know. So you're kind of in risky territory, but you have to know in time. And this is just a reality of the professional game. And I think what Johann has done, he's done what a player has done. He's worked things out as best for him. And I agree with you. I would have liked to have seen the last step. I think there's one more step.
I agree
in this man, and he's very, very popular for anyone who's ever met him. But there is a critique or a criticism outside of the group. Some of it justified, some of it a little bit strong at times.
Yeah,
But I think it'd be brilliant if he can finish in a high. And he's honest and he's decent, he's straight up. So,
and I think this group of players, especially, they won't let their standards drop.
Yeah, let's hope so.
They're way too good for that.
Candidates for this job, it's difficult because you're kind of 2 years out from a World Cup, and regarding international level, and then club coaches who've contracts signed and stuff like that. In this recent cycle, I was looking back in the coaches that I've been involved in. And have been involved in Munster: Declan Kidney, Alan Gaffney, Tony McGahan, Rob Penny, Anthony Foley, Rassie Erasmus, Johann Van Graan. There's been a lot of change there in the last number of years. So I think this next appointment, we keep saying every appointment is really important. It is a big job, and it will interest a lot of people throughout the world. Do Munster need to go outside the group? Because one obvious candidate who's been there for a couple of years, he's moved his family over from the UK, bought a house, loves the club. I like him. I played against him. And that's Graham Rowntree. He's a bit of an old school approach that has been involved in the modern game. He's been a forwards coach with Quins, the British and Irish Lions, England, Leicester, Georgia in recent years. And is he someone that could be a candidate to just keep this transition fairly smooth and take the head coach role? And then obviously you need some assistant coaches with Larkham leaving as well.
Yeah, I'm sure he definitely relish it. Maybe I'm not really sure. It's very different. It's very, very different to go from a unit coach, like a forwards coach or a defence coach, or into a head coaching role. You're dealing with a huge amount. I wonder, will Munster go down the route of keeping in Rowntree, obviously, because I think he's brilliant, bringing in two more coaches and then have a director of rugby that's going to deal with everything off the pitch, and allow then those coaches just to focus all their time and effort onto the pitch? And I think that maybe, I've no doubt Van Graan probably struggled in that sense, because I think it's really difficult with everything that's going on off the pitch to try and get clarity and understand that your main job is on the pitch, but when there's so much going on off it, it can be hard to separate it, I've no doubt. So I'd love to see them go down a route of director of rugby type of a role, filter down then to maybe 3 or 4 coaches, whatever it needs to be. They all have a role, obviously, and they're all very important, but they just filter back up to that director of rugby who can take the pressure off everybody. And if that's the case, well, then maybe a head coaching role will completely suit Rowntree, but I do think it's important he stays.
Yeah, well, I think he's signed up and he has committed, which is important. And look, I think he's the obvious choice for me. Very simple, easy choice. Appoint him as head coach, bring in some coaches that underneath. Obviously, if he stepped up, you probably have to get a forwards coach, and we know that a backs coach has to be got as well. I've heard talk of a director of rugby, and I think that's something that is really important, I think, particularly to try and nurture all the good stuff that's happening and happens and these young players. But there is a lot to it. There's a lot of pressure on coaches and for Munster just to try and get some continuity, and hopefully this can get sorted out really quick. Obvious candidates worldwide are Scott Robertson, Tony Brown, these kind of guys, Wayne Smith. But I think you're changing a lot there by bringing them in. Maybe Munster go outside and they get the best coach they can in the world, but I think there's one sitting right in there in amongst them at the moment in Graham Rowntree, and I think he could be the man to take the club forward and then get some very good coaches. Dare I say Declan Kidney, he'd be a great director of rugby. I'm not sure if he wants to keep going in the UK. He's doing a good job with London Irish, but someone who knows Munster and has had success with Munster, maybe he might be a great candidate to come back and be a director of rugby there. But look, there's a lot of moving parts to this whole thing, and it's a big story, and it's one that obviously we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks again, and it'll until we get these appointments. But I think the sooner the better that they get these appointments. It's not going to be an easy job, but they've got to get the right people for the job. So look, moving on to what we saw at the weekend. You mentioned Billy Holland there, and congrats to Billy on the award as well for the work he's doing off the field, and since he's retired has been amazing. Billy said last week that he nailed these colours to the mast. We didn't. That Munster would go and have one of the greatest wins in their history. You did not.
I said they would win.
Well, I can't remember that. You have to send me the audio of that. But you know, you pick up all the papers on Monday, and there's pictures of Munster players and on the front of the papers, not on the back. They're on the back as well, of course. Just give me your thoughts on that and what it sum up the whole craziness of the situation.
Yeah, look, I was incredibly giddy after the match. I was so proud as a Munster supporter to witness that and see. I thought it was an unbelievable performance. I thought, obviously, you know, you're always going to wonder if those young guys could step up. More than capable of doing it, and to see them shine on that level was brilliant. But couple that with the likes of O'Mahony been absolutely outstanding, Tyke Byrne literally dragging people through the game, and Carberry, you know, going about his business, Earls, like it was just a brilliant performance. And it was the way they played. They went after the game, and I thought that was so good. And they just literally didn't give Wasps a sniff. And at times I thought it was like a kind of a Barbarians kind of sevens game. The ball was so open, and it was literally just like, let's go and have a crack. And I thought, look, that's not going to be the way every game, I get it. But for what it was last weekend, I thought it was brilliant. And yeah, I think that for me, what it does is the lift that it'll give that group, the group that are sitting at home, unfortunately, at the moment, and the group that played. I think they rock into that review on Monday morning, and rightly so, are delighted with how it went, but also wondering, are they in with a shot this weekend? And I think that that's where this group need to go. You need to have that amount of players that can play and perform at that level in order to push you to that next level.
So Munster were missing 34 players, given everything that happened with COVID in South Africa, and two groups. Number quarantine in South Africa, a number came home, they had to quarantine here, so they're missing 34 players. Wasps were missing 18 through injury before the game, so 18 injuries. Not every one of those players are going to start anyway, so they were missing some big names: Dan Robson, Launchbury, Fekitoa, Fafita, real bruisers here. Okay, so then before the game, a couple of hours before the game, which kind of put the game in doubt, Wasps had COVID outbreak. They end up losing 4 starters and 1 off the bench. So we'll say they're up to 23. Did it kind of balance itself out a little bit? Because I kind of, part of that was kind of the sympathy and the kind of empathy turned to Wasps, that it was poor Wasps, and, you know, kind of Munster situation was forgotten, really. Now, we have to say Munster had 9 internationals starting, so they weren't in the worst position no matter what happened. Even if Wasps had a full team here, they still had 9 internationals. But their kind of situation of bringing all these debutants, guys who had never played for Munster, they're only kids really, into the group with that 9, did it kind of balance itself out a little bit? I still think Munster were in less position than Wasps. But it was kind of crazy, the whole situation, wasn't it? And I just found myself last week saying, of course, there's the bit of fire in me thinking, yeah, I'd love to be in that situation. But I just kind of couldn't bring myself to say that Munster are going to win this game, because you'd kind of crazy to think that. Did it kind of balance itself out a bit with the COVID situation with Wasps?
Maybe, yeah. No, I think when you look at who Wasps brought in, Nazim Carr in flank, quality senior rugby player. Tom Youngs came in, Le Bourgois in 12. They had good players coming in, and I know that definitely they were, reaching down to their doldrums. But I think for Munster to have so many, it was the debutants, it was the young lads who had never played senior rugby before at that level. I think that was the reason why we got so excited about Munster, as opposed to feeling sorry for Wasps. And I didn't really feel sorry for Wasps, to be honest. I was just literally so happy for those guys to see them not just perform, but excel at that level. Like, they were outstanding, from Buckley at hooker, Owen O'Connor in second row, just threw themselves about. And Pat Campbell, and these guys, they're there now. Like, they've launched themselves onto this platform, and if you're going back to training this week in the HBC, you're thinking deep down, like, give me another shot. Like, I want another go at this. Like, you're feeding off what that was. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. I think Jesus, so many good points. So Quinny, like, whatever about the players, like O'Mahony's chase back, like
five debutants: Patrick Campbell, Scott Buckley, James French, Owen O'Connor, and Daniel Okeke. There's 5 debutants start. John Hodnett has played no rugby in 12 months. He had an Achilles injury. So Chris Farrell is out for a number of months. He hasn't played this season with injury. Dave Kilcoyne hasn't played in 4 or 5 weeks. Some of these players have played no rugby in a long time. So even though you had the 9 internationals going out there, I think you still had a lot of a really tough situation for people. I thought Chris Farrell stepping up like that, and when you're coming back from injury, you want to kind of get some minutes under your belt, even with the club, or to have to play that game and step up. Roman Salanoa comes onto the bench. He's been injured for a number of months. And then the rest of them have never played. So it's incredible to think. The red card, what was your take on that? It was probably it really kind of deflated Wasps. And I think psychologically, even though Wasps looked dangerous at times, and they got a brilliant try from Alfie Barbary after he was sent off, it looked like the towel was thrown in at that stage. Just their body language changed, and they kept fighting for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was a little bit harsh. I felt that I definitely thought it was a penalty. I think you could go as far as the yellow card. I just think that Dave Kilcoyne was dipped into that as himself, and it was more the first tackler that affected his body positioning. So he gets tackled and he tries to power out of that tackle, and as he's powering out of the tackle, Brad Shields comes in. So, but the way the game has gone, you're talking head contact with a shoulder. It's very difficult to try and find ways, but I do think that from a Wasp perspective, you'd be a little bit disappointed with that.
My take on the red card is, if it was a yellow, would we be jumping up and down saying it should have been a red? No, but I think it was a red. And I think the problem for Brad Shields here is it's that last surge forward and that last bit of force that he puts into it. And that's the risk for players nowadays continually. That if they kind of, that last movement, if it's a drive forward and there's force in it, you're in the lap of the gods. You just don't know what's going to happen, and you've got to more accept that tackle. And if Dave Kilcoyne hits his shoulder and he's the last forward movement, that's your mitigation straight away. But I think Brad Shields just comes forward with that force at the end. So it was it was harsh, but I
It was
think
just
it
a
was
pity. But
it was a pity.
and as I said to you there, I can totally see why it is a red.
He's a hell of a player. He's a hell of a player, Brad Shields, I think, and he was a big loss to Wasps, and they looked their body language changed there. And then just before half time, we have Owen O'Connor blocks down the Wasps number 9, Sam Wolstenholme, and picks it up, pops to Ty Byrne, and then he nearly gets to the line. And I think it was Dan Frost. It was Dan Frost, the Wasps hooker, who just comes in from totally the wrong side, kills the ball. He gets put in the bin. That's kind of game over for me, because that's the 10 minutes. And I was looking to think, would Munster be ruthless now and go for this 10 minutes after half time? And they were. I think they actually made a mistake in tapping the penalty just before half time. They should have went for a scrum. Even though their scrum was under pressure, it would have been 8 against 6 there. And I think they would have almost certainly scored a try. So I thought that was an opportunity lost. But the way they came out in the second half, and they got fortune as well, didn't they, with Keith Earl's try, and then Andrew Conway, the loose pass. But you make your own luck with your intensity, I suppose, and your effort levels, and the stars were aligning for Munster here. But the Patrick Campbell try was a really special moment for him, and it was a brilliant try.
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought I know you're talking about luck and making your own luck. I just think that the pressure that Munster line speed put on Wasps just didn't allow them any room to breathe. I think obviously they had that, Tom Young's break in the first couple of minutes. Brilliant chase back by O'Mahony. But I think that kind of set the tone for the rest of the game, that Munster are telling Wasps, like, you're not going to get anything easy here. Like, that would have been, O'Mahony doesn't make that, then that's a different face. You're 5 or 7 minutes or points down, 2 minutes into the game, and you're trying to chase that score back. So I just thought they were really astute in terms of picking their points when they needed to, in terms of their penalties. But look, brilliant move, Patrick Campbell. The acceleration, the confidence to go for that, the little show and go, and he's gone. He's been doing that week in, week out for young Munsters, and to see him to be able to back himself to do that in this moment of a Champions Cup, your Munster debut was brilliant, really good.
Yeah, your debut in Munster is in a European game. It's incredible. Scott Buckley as well, the try and the performance, his lineouts, play around the field, really special for him scoring the try as well. Yeah,
and it was funny, when they panned to him in the crowd. I don't know if you saw it, to announce the player match, and sure, he looks like a child, to be fair to him. Like, the three of them sitting there beside each other, himself, Pat Campbell, and Owen O'Connor. 3 debuts, 3 brilliant performances from them, and they're just giddy. You can see it, aren't they? They're just so delighted, and rightly so. I just thought it was really special, Quinny. I think, I felt over the last maybe year or two there's been a little bit of disconnect with Munster, their supporters, how they're playing, and I just think that a game like that can bring it all back together. And everywhere you went on Sunday in Limerick, people were talking about.
And it's important for the clubs as well, because I think the clubs were helpful in this situation, and Munster thanked them for that. And maybe there's a bit of unity and togetherness that needs to come back between clubs and Munster. And obviously the people, the fans and the supporters, they're all ingrained and involved in clubs. So this might be bigger than just this win.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. I thought it was brilliant. I thought Ian Costello coming out before the game, you're 100% right, thanking the clubs for their cooperation, and because literally they had to go into clubs, on the Monday or Tuesday before AIL last weekend and say, listen, by the way, I know you've selected your squad for this game, but you're not going to have any of our guys training, so that they're not outside the COVID bubble, so that we can continue to prepare as one large group. So even though they might not be involved against Wasps, they won't be playing AIL. And I think when you're upfront about something like that and there's constant communication, kudos to Causey and his coach and stuff. I thought it was I think we'll look back at this at the end of the season and see this as a defining moment for this club.
Andy Kiriakou as well, who's involved in the academy. He was with the forwards, Greg Oliver. So I think they deserve a lot of credit, and they've got that. I think they've, for what they've done the last couple of weeks. And, you know, I was over in Dubai a few weeks ago and we were expecting them to go to South Africa. I was over there, we were doing a dinner over there, and it all changed very, very quickly. And you're meeting people over there who were just excited about what Munster means to them and what the DNA is of Munster. And I think it's, you know, the stand up and fight motto was really, really kind of brought to the fore on Sunday, and it was really special. These young players, you know, I think we obviously mentioned Patrick Campbell, Scott Buckley, James French, who struggled a little bit in the scrum, which is understandable because it is a massive step up. But I thought his effort around the field and the carries he made, Owen O'Connor was brilliant as well. Daniel Okeke looked a little bit nervy at the start, that he didn't really get much ball in his hand. I think Munster, they probably kicked a little bit much at times, but saw a couple of big charges for him. I think he's the first, Limerick people probably don't know this, the first Limerick-born player to play for Munster, to debut for Munster in 7 or 8 years, which is, I think he's only 19 and he's just such a powerhouse.
Smashing talent, isn't he? He's obviously playing week in, week out with Shannon, came up through the school system with Ard Scoreach, and so I just think, look, there's so much. Mark Donnelly coming off the bench.
Yeah, Mark Donnelly, John Ford and Conor Maloney looked like they wanted to kill someone. It was brilliant. They were just really aggressive. Ethan Coughlin is a great picture.
I know.
Online of him years ago, getting a picture with Conor Murray and Peter O'Mahony, and another one in the dressing room. Tony Butler, really talented, and Jonathan Wren, of course, he's a very talented player. It was brilliant. Okay, my kind of it's not pessimism. It's just bringing this down a little bit here.
Come on, Quinny.
Let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. It's a massive, massive moment. Lots of people saying it's one of the greatest wins ever, possibly the greatest ever, and that's relevant, and that can be a fact. There's been so many big games over the years. This, I think, given the circumstances and given the players and the debutants and there's a lot of pressure. Europe is a different week. I've said that. It's pretty close. Okay, Wasps had their issues as well, which made it a little bit easier for them. But I think the way they handled themselves and the way they kind of put on that jersey and wore with pride, it was incredible. And hopefully there's so many other players who were not involved, academy guys and young players who were in South Africa. You could start naming those guys who were a level above these players that debuted on Sunday. So it looks like there's a lot of good talent there. The criticism around young players and bringing young players through has been going on for a good few years. Hopefully this heartens people and gives them the lift that there is some quality young players, and that they've got to try and be nurtured and brought through now. And maybe you'll see a situation that some of these fellas won't be getting games in a few years and they might want to start moving and going. And you could have Leinster's problem that they can't hold on to some of their young talent. But look, it was a brilliant weekend, but they've got to dust themselves off now. I always think mentally it's really important now that you put it in perspective, you bag it and use it obviously for growth for these younger players. A dream come true for them at the weekend. But Castres comes Saturday night now, and very, very quickly in sport, Niamh, you know this as a coach, you can do all the good work, all the brilliant work that you've done the previous week and come undone if psychologically you're not right. And I think Caroline Currid, we mentioned Ian Costello and Andy Kiriakou and Greg Oliver and the other people who helped. But I think Caroline Currid's role in the last couple of weeks, getting the players right mentally, I think she's going to have a vital role this week in bringing them back down to earth as well. She's had brilliant success. She was there as a sports psychologist for a short period when I played, obviously went off into GA, left the Limerick Hurlers, the incredible success they had. And she's back with Munster. I think her role now this week is absolutely vital in getting them mentally right for Saturday night against Castres. Yeah,
completely. I think you've got to ride that crest of the wave, Quinny. If I'm coaching that group of players, you're continuing to talk about their confidence. Prime example, 2019 World Cup semi-final. England are probably playing the 80 minutes of their lives against New Zealand in the semi-final. very difficult to try and replicate that 7 days later. I just think that these players, you ride the crested wave, but these young guys, and then the group that are coming back in, that there will be, changes to this team. You get them up in terms of that, you flip it around and say, look, we're going on this momentum, and Castres are a different kettle of fish. They lost last weekend at home. Do they really care about this tournament now? Top 14 is all, the French teams, the real ingrained French teams. That's all they want to win. That they just want to win the top 14, and Europe is very secondary to that. And so do they come over here now and be willing to, play a second or third string team, resting their players for their following week's league game? It's hard to know really, but I just think that them losing at home last week was a big faux pas for them, and Munster might be able to get the fruition of that in terms of I can't see them coming with a fully loaded team, to be honest.
Yeah, this is a banana skin, though, and I hate banana skins. I hated them in sport. I'd rather be playing the favourites or a team that are favourites to beat you. But they've got to deal with this now, and I think they're probably in a better position now. Hopefully, they will get some of the more experienced players back, and the guys who came back from South Africa back into the team, and they've got to do that. I think. Yeah. Hopefully, we can see. These young players now won't. It's going to be difficult because, as I said, there's a load of guys who went to South Africa who were looking for opportunities and trying to play for Munster. And I think, getting players out in the field this week is really important, because Castres you just don't know with the French side. They've lost against Harlequins at the weekend. If Munster can win on Saturday night at 8:00, you think Castres are out of it then. Then it makes it a little bit easier. Even though we've a lot of history with Castres over the years, it makes it a little bit easier going there in January to try and get a win there. If Munster win 4 out of 4 in this situation, they're going to be in a great position. But it's a dangerous proposition. Castres, they could come to Thomond Park and spoil a little bit. It's not a party, but they could kind of set you on the back foot again. And that's really important that they're mentally right this week, and enjoy the week, as you said. Enjoy it. Sport is hard at times. You can have disappointments. Enjoy the good moments. And I think they just got to get their heads right this week for a Castres team who you just don't know what their approach will be.
No, you don't, but you'll definitely see changes. Asking the likes of Hodnett, Chris Farrell to play 2 weeks in a row coming back from long-term injuries, probably won't do that. And then obviously Carberry's injury, that was definitely the one sour note from last weekend, I think. And hopefully it's not too serious, but when you don't really hear anything in the report the Monday or whatever, you can't help but feel that there's something more ominous than what we saw. But yeah, look, I do think there'll be changes. I think there'll be opportunities for this group that we're isolating maybe. But also you got to reward good performances too. And so it's a very difficult job for Van Graan. So hopefully they get that balance right.
Yeah, and I think some of them, obviously, just in summary, I think we're talking about all the young players here, what they did, and it's incredible. And credit to them. They'll remember this for a long, long time. But Peter O'Mahony, Tyke Byrne, Andrew Conway, Earlsey, they were just brilliant. John Hodnett coming in there, some of the big turnovers in the first half. So it bodes well for the future, and that's what people want. Whether they win trophies or not, I think if you're doing it and you've seen some change and you get a bit excited about it, you still have to deal with the disappointments, I think. But look, what happened in the last couple of weeks of the weekend is it has that galvanizing effect you sense with Munster going forward. So we'll see what happens next week. We're going to leave it there. That's the 10th episode of Red 78. We'll be back next week with more analysis on that Castres game. Hopefully it's another good weekend and a great weekend that people can celebrate it in Thomond Park. Any thoughts on the weekend's performance? Who stood out? What impact this game will have on the belief in Munster for the rest of the season? Let us know on Twitter at Rugby Channel 15. You can tweet us or by leaving a comment wherever you're watching this across the Rugby Channel social media pages. Make sure to subscribe to the Red 78 wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next week. Well, thanks, Niamh. It was a positive podcast this week. It was a great week for Munster Rugby, and hopefully it continues next week.
Brilliant.
The Munster Rugby Podcast. Red 78 with Alan Quinlan and Niamh Briggs. Nobody knows Munster Rugby better.